Yeah. So anyway, we're going to jump right in. How are you this morning, Espi Frazier?
I am doing well. I'm happy to say, my dear, God has blessed me to wake up today.
All right. Well, let's get started. I am Kibibi Ajanku, and I am the curator for the Espi Frazier exhibition that has been up for quite some time, just the most recently at the Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Museum in the Bierman Gallery. And I am happy, pleased, proud, and honored to have an opportunity to have a chat with Espi Frazier, the artist herself. So I want to introduce you. How are you, Espi, today?
I am doing very well, my dear. Thank you for inviting me to do this interview.
Your art is amazing. I never cease to be just kind of elevated when I look at it and inspired when I look at your art. You work in a lot of different mediums. You work on fabric, you work on wood, you work on paper, and you work with a lot of different mediums. You work with needles, you work with paintbrushes, you work with pencils, you work with pens. And your messaging has evolved, and each series takes on a different kind of energy, but there's a flow that really kind of sews and ties it all together. There's always an elevation of women, Black women most specifically. There's always that just strong feeling that you are looking at African American contemporary art. And then there's this way of, you have an uncanny way of working in different mediums and making them feel like they are one and one to another. So when you're on paper, it might feel like you're on canvas. When you're on canvas, it might feel like you're on wood. When you're on wood, it might feel like you're working with a crochet needle. So I don't know, talk to me about your origin and yeah.
Well, when I began as an artist, my interest was in fashion design. And when I first started traditional training in art school, I went into the School of the Art Institute studying fashion design, thinking that's what I wanted to do, but eventually realized that I wanted to draw the clothing. I didn't want to make the clothing. And so I started taking a lot of illustration. I took a lot of figure drawing, which was a very wonderful thing. A good foundation for an artist is to understand the fundamentals of drawing. And then I took a fashion illustration course. And from that, I was challenged by a teacher to draw on a different surface other than paper.
Ah.
And so that's how all of the woodworking, you just never know how things are gonna happen in your life. You know, I never dreamed of working in wood, you know. I saw wood and admired it, but I never thought that I would ever do such a thing. And so she told me to work on a different surface. So I found this piece of plywood under my mother's house, and I drew a figure, a female figure on the wood with just plain black ink.
Mm-hmm.
And so the process has evolved over 40 years, really starting from just that one ink drawing and evolving into adding color, inks for color, creating my own wood grain on the wood, adding mosaic tiles and beads and things like that. And I have a copyright on this technique called wood graphics. And so I've been working on that for 40 years, but now I'm at the point where I want to work in a different media. I have done enough in the wood. You know how you graduate from one thing to another? And so this is like a transition using the same techniques that I used on the wood on canvas.
Well,
so,
before you go to the canvas, can you talk a little bit about what this copyright is, this wood graphics? Is that the grain that you're drawing on the wood?
Well, that's legal. It's my process.
Mm-hmm,
So nobody can take my process away. You know, I learned from a friend of mine that when you develop something like that as an artist, is to get a copyright on that, on your technique, so no one else can claim wood graphics as their own.
Well, since we're not looking at it right here, is there a way that you can kind of describe it so that?
Well, wood graphic is what I start off where my work is primarily dealing with the female figure, and so I will start out with the female figure on the piece of wood, just drawing in pencil first, and then going back into it with black ink, creating different lines and that represent wood grain, creating my own kind of design. So the wood that I had, I wasn't able to purchase expensive wood, so I had to get plywood. So I created my own pattern and design.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I got the black ink line down, then I would add color. And I wanted to use colored ink so that I could still see the transparency of the wood. You know, I didn't want to cover up the wood with heavy opaque color, so I used colored inks. And it reminds me of working with stained glass. I love stained glass, and I wanted to have that kind of effect of stained glass on wood. So that's why I used the colored inks. And then eventually a wonderful artist, Joy Scott, was talking to me, and she was saying, Espi, why don't you use other medium, include other media with what you're doing? And so I got used to using mosaic tiles and nails and beads, and it just changed the whole texture of the work, and it just made it, I was excited. You know, it really was an exciting process. And I never thought that I would be doing any of this stuff. I taught myself how to do carving using a chisel and mallet. And eventually I evolved into using a Dremel tool, which made my work a lot easier. When I was in grad school, my grad school teacher told me, she says, you need power, girl. You can't be doing this. You would be taking forever just using a mallet and a chisel on some of the larger pieces, you know. So I use a Dremel tool, and it has different bits and things where I can carve deeper and get different textures in the wood and stuff. And I find that working with wood is the same kind of process that I had with the fashion illustration. It's all about design and pattern. So I think all of the works that I do is very consistent when it comes to the element of using the female as the focus of the piece and using different patterns and designs and seeing if I can make them all work together.
Yeah, and you know, it seems like you work with so many dimensions, and you're creating these layers.
Mm-hmm.
And not only the layers are there in the actual technique that you're using, but the layers are there in the imaging that you're giving. I know one of my favorite pieces of yours is that wood panel with a mother and a child. So it's a Madonna figure.
Yes, mother of us all.
That's right, the mother of us all. But then you have that theme of beautiful women that just goes through every piece that I see. And so can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, you know, I told you I had an interest and a background in fashion, and I looked at a lot of fashion. When I was starting in fashion illustration, all of the models were white European women, blonde, blue-eyed, the traditional European look. And I just thought, well, you know, Black women are gorgeous and beautiful, and I would like to represent our beauty and our culture, you know, especially the church ladies and the beautiful church ladies. I remember when I went to church, it was like a fashion show, looking at all the beautiful hats and the way the women dressed and their makeup and their hair and all of that. And I saw that elegance growing up as a child. And I wanted to represent that in my artwork. I wanted to present a positive image of women from the past and into the future, because we have contributed a great deal to fashion and style, whether people want to give us credit or not.
That's right. That's right. What we see in your exhibition are all the way from the mother of us all through beautiful women that represent us spiritually, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That is in that mermaid. And then we see the canvas pieces that are the church women, the representation of the church women. But many of them have that Victorian kind of style.
Yes. Well, I loved, you know, the photographer James Van Der Zee when he photographed during the Harlem Renaissance, and the women and all of the beautiful clothing and all these scenes. I wanted to put that in my work. And so a lot of those pieces are based on his photography. I loved his work.
Ah, I see. Well, you certainly did your own thing with it. And it certainly is beautiful. And it certainly makes that statement that fashion is driven by people of color. Fashion is driven by Black women. And those women are absolutely glorious. They look at you with an intention and an intensity. And so not only is the beauty coming out of it, but the spirit as well.
Well, it is my hope when people look at my art that they can connect with the person that they're looking at. I try really hard to have that eye contact, or even having the artwork look back at you while you're looking at it.
Yeah, well, just a really inspiring through line and an intentional through line. What's next? We've talked about your origins in fashion. We've talked about your work with wood. We've talked about how it transitioned. We didn't say to paper. We didn't talk much about your work on paper, but there are some really beautiful works on paper that are huge, that are large and magnificent. And then there's a Black Lives Matter series. And we go into this Church Ladies series that is both on canvas in a large scale and on canvas on a smaller scale, so that people can actually acquire pieces at whatever level if they're interested for their own personal collections. But let's talk about, that's kind of a through line. What's next? What do you see kind of in the future upcoming?
Well, I want to continue more with the works on canvas. I'm really enjoying doing the canvas pieces because it's really taking me back full circle into my fashion illustration kind of thing. I'm really enjoying painting these beautiful women of now and beyond. I'm also working on a series of crocheted pieces. I think I have one. I don't know if you can see it.
We get a sneak peek. So while we're waiting, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting a sneak peek for the upcoming fiber work of Espi Frazier. This is fantastic.
This is a shawl, and it's all crocheted, and it's applique pieces. It's got bead work on it. It's a lot of work. I've been working on this particular piece for a couple of months. And so I'm planning to enter this into a fiber arts exhibition. So I'm working on a whole series of crocheted pieces and the canvas pieces. So that's what's going to be happening in the here, now, and the future.
All right. Well, we appreciate you. We have gotten a feel for Espi Frazier, past, present, and future. More works to come. I'm looking forward to seeing what's next. I will always enjoy watching your work as it evolves. I'll always enjoy visiting. Yeah, I do enjoy my studio visits with you, and I do enjoy seeing your work in exhibitions. So we haven't heard the last of Espi Frazier.
I am grateful and appreciative of you sharing your time and helping me present my artwork to the public. I really appreciate it, and thank you very much for this lovely interview. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.